Welcome to Sports Guy Talking. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about Nathaniel Hackett getting fired by the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are currently 4-11 and are on pace to have the worst season ever in franchise history. Jerry Rossberg, he's going to replace Nathaniel Hackett as he was named the interim head coach for the final two games of the 2022 NFL season. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with a topic question. So, here it is. What is your reaction to the Broncos firing Nathaniel Hackett? And my thoughts on the Broncos firing Nathaniel Hackett is that it's about time that they fired the man. Nathaniel Hackett is one of the worst coaches that I've ever seen coach professional football. Now, is he the worst? No, but he's certainly up there in terms of how bad someone can coach the game of football. Nathaniel Hackett did not know how to coach football whatsoever at the NFL level, especially this season. In terms of putting his players in position to succeed, he failed at that part. In terms of clock management, he failed at that part. And he was supposed to be a player's coach. He was supposed to have positive energy, be charismatic. He couldn't even do that. He can't control the locker room. He can't control the players misbehaving. I mean, did you see what Randy Gregory did after that Christmas Day game against the Rams during the post-game handshakes? He started getting into fights with the opposing team. Did you guys see what the Broncos were doing to Russell Wilson throughout the year? I mean, the Broncos players were screaming at Russell Wilson. They were getting in his face and they were getting mad. Did you see what Brett Rippon, the backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos, tried to do when he tried to stick up for Russell Wilson, tried to defend him to his offensive line? His offensive line said, no, they're not going to go ahead and defend Russell Wilson. They actually got into a fight with Brett Rippon, their backup quarterback. I mean, in terms of being able to control a locker room, in order to control a team's emotions, Nathaniel Hackett failed in that regard. He also failed to understand how to run a basic clock management. He also managed to be the first coach ever that I've seen to be willing to settle for a 64-yard field goal. That was in game one of the 2022 NFL season. That was his first ever game that he coached at the NFL level. Down by 1 point late in the game, Broncos, they're attempting to drive down the field. 3rd and 13, whatever it was a third and long play. They're not even in Seahawks territory with about a little more than a minute left to go. They decide to call a screen pass, and that screen pass gets them to 4th and 5, gets them to the Seahawks 46-yard line. And instead of trying to hurry up, instead of trying to go for it, trying to pick up the first down quickly, or trying to use a timeout to stop the clock and talk things over, Nathaniel Hackett, his team basically lets the clock wind down, and they basically kill the clock, and they basically wait till like 2 seconds to call timeout on the play clock. Which already seems like it's a waste because you already wasted like 35, 40 seconds on the clock, and you still have all 3 timeouts. Now you end up burning one, meaning that you go for it, you fail, and the game is basically over. Instead, Nathaniel Hackett is like, okay, let's call a timeout, and let's send on the field goal unit for a 64-yard field goal. I mean, he was acting like his kicker is Justin Tucker. I know Brandon McManus, he's a pretty good kicker for the Denver Broncos, but he's no Justin Tucker. I mean, nobody is. I mean, this is not even a gimme kick for Justin Tucker, okay? But to send out Brandon McManus to kick a 64-yard field goal, I mean, what was that? That is horrible basic math logic right there. I don't even understand. And here's the thing. Brandon McManus missed the kick, which, okay, fine. But the Seahawks, they actually iced the kicker. That should be a sign to Nathaniel Hackett that, hey, maybe I should actually be going for it on this thing instead of trying to attempt a 64-yard field goal. But no, the man has to come out right there and say, you know what? We're going to try to kick a 64-yard field goal again, which, of course, he missed. I can't fault Brandon McManus for it, though, because 64 yards is a really long kick to make, especially in a pressure situation. I mean, come on, man. Come on. Nathaniel Hackett, I don't even know what he was even thinking. I know after the game, he was like, yeah, we're going to go for it. We're going to go for it. I'm so sorry that we kicked the field goal. We're going to go for it. We're going to make sure we're going to put the ball in Russ's hands. And you know what? He actually did follow through with that word because every time there was a 4th down, whether it was 4th and 1, whether it was 4th and 10, no matter the distance, he always had Russ go in empty sets and say, Russ, you go ahead and throw this pigskin around, because that's exactly what he did. And I also want to talk about game 2. This was a game that the Broncos did win, but I also want to point out about how Nathaniel Hackett had poor clock management in that game against the Houston Texans, because the Broncos, they basically had to they were in field goal position, then they basically got themselves out of position when they should have called the timeout, tried to help the kicker make the field goal. Instead, they ended up having to punt because they were out of field goal range. So that meant that they had to punt right there. And they also kept getting almost delay of games a lot. Kept getting delay of games. They kept having to snap the ball really late. So that was also a screw up that the Broncos often had under Nathaniel Hackett. He couldn't get his plays in time. His teams were unorganized. They were penalized a whole lot. I mean, he certainly was in over his head. He was one of the worst coaches that I've ever seen at the NFL level. The only reason I'm not going to say that he's going to be the worst coach that I've ever seen in the recent NFL is because I've seen guys like Urban Meyer, I've seen guys like Matt Rule be even worse than him in terms of being able to control a team whatsoever, or in the case of Matt Rule, just game management. All right. And to see what Nathaniel Hackett did, he did not do a good job whatsoever. Now, do I think that Nathaniel Hackett is 100% to blame? Of course not. I mean, he's a first-time NFL head coach. He's a guy that's only making $4 million a year, so he's not even a coach that's getting paid a ton of money. Okay. I mean, he was on a 4-year, $16 million contract. I mean, that's what it seems like the math is adding up to. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're the Denver Broncos, are you going to fire the guy that's only making $4 million a year, or are you going to cut or trade the quarterback that's making $245 million basically over a 5-year span? That contract doesn't even start till 2024. So basically, he's on a 7-year contract, and he's making way too much money to count. I mean, what are you going to do if you're the Denver Broncos? Who are you going to can? You go and can the head coach, especially a first-time head coach that really hasn't proven much of anything outside of working with Aaron Rodgers. Now, did I like the hire at the time? I hate to admit this, but I did like the hire at the time, but I thought it was because he was a player's coach, and I thought that he knew what he was doing, and he could at least keep a locker room together, kind of let Russ do his thing, but he can't even do that. He did not put players in a good position to succeed. But at the same time, this is also Russell Wilson's fault, because Russell Wilson, he played in the perfect system. He played in a system that allowed Russ to be Russ, and he didn't want that. I mean, Pete Carroll, he tried to tell Russ, hey, Russ, you're not the kind of quarterback that should be playing in a Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers type of offense. You should not be playing drop back, empty sets, focus on the quick game. You need to be handing the ball off to your running backs. You need to be doing a lot of play action. You need to be throwing the ball down the field. That's what he tried to tell Russell Wilson to do. But Russell Wilson, he didn't want to do that. Now he ends up having to pay the price. And has he gotten help from his O-line? No, not necessarily. But also, that's also Nathaniel Hackett to also try to put him in position to help him out with. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett, I mean, he's got to do a better job covering up the O-line deficiencies. I mean, that's why they pay you to be a head coach in the NFL, because that's what you do. To put things into perspective for how bad the Broncos offense was, they averaged 15.5 points per game. That was league worst in there. All right, 15.5 points per game. That's just really awful. I don't really know what else to say other than that. It's trash. His teams also converted 28.6% of the third downs. That's also the worst third down team in the National Football League. Now, look, the Broncos, I'd be young to get rid of Russell Wilson too, but they can't do that because that's going to create a $107 million dead cap hit. So they're obviously not going to do that. He basically eats up half of their salary cap. So that's definitely not happening. So, of course, let's talk about what else the Broncos could do. I mean, obviously, we can pile on Nathaniel Hackett. He was a terrible coach all around. I could go on with examples of how he was awful, but I think you guys basically get the point. He did not know basic clock management skills. He knew nothing about game management skills, and he knew nothing about putting players in positions to succeed. I'm starting to question whether he actually did any of the work when he was the Packers offensive coordinator, or was it Aaron Rodgers running those meetings? Because that's what I'm starting to wonder, because the way that he coached things in Denver, he looked like he did not know what he was doing whatsoever. But yeah, let's talk about who the Broncos are going to hire potentially as their next head coach. I'm hearing a couple of names out there. Frank Reich. I'm hearing about Sean Payton. I'm hearing about Dan Quinn. And a name that I'm going to throw out there for myself is that I think they got to hire Shane Waldron. I know a lot of you guys that are probably watching the video, you guys are probably going to be wondering, who the heck is Shane Waldron? He's the Seahawks offensive coordinator right now. He's the guy that's gotten Geno Smith to perform really well, and he was a former offensive coordinator for Russell Wilson. He was actually the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks the last year that Russell was in Seattle. So I think that if you're the Broncos, you got to go hire this guy. You got to hire someone that Russell Wilson's had success with in the past. I also understand that Russell Wilson, he doesn't want to play in a system like Seattle. But honestly, if I'm the Broncos, I'm telling Russell, hey, you were successful in Seattle before running the system. You're not successful doing things the way that you want to do it. You're going to run the system that you were running in Seattle for years to come. So That's what I would highly, highly prioritize in terms of getting Russell Wilson to get back to his ways for the Denver Broncos. Okay, so you got to look at it from that perspective. Now, what do I think about the Frank Reich hiring? I think that it would be interesting, but I don't think he's going to go to the Broncos because I know that Frank Reich, he's moved back to Charlotte, and I don't think he's going to make a flight all the way down to go live in Denver. I don't see that happening whatsoever. As for Sean Payton, he says he wants to get back into coaching. Let's see if he takes the Broncos job or not. But we also know that the Saints, they own his rights, and the Broncos, they're going to have to give up something to get Sean Payton. And we know that the Broncos have no meaningful assets at this point in terms of what they have because of the Russell trade that happened, okay? And you also look at the other teams that Sean Payton's potentially interested in, the Chargers, the Cowboys, possibly the Cardinals. Those jobs could even open up. So when you look at it from that perspective, Sean Payton's not a likely name. So at this point, it's probably going to be Dan Quinn, or it's going to be an unknown coach or whatever. It's probably going to be Dan Quinn because Dan Quinn, he's good at coaching defense. You want to make sure you want to keep the Denver defense intact because their defense is pretty good. They can get this turned around. And they also have this offensive consultant on the Cowboys that Dan Quinn's likely to bring along. His name is Brian Schottenheimer. That was an offensive coordinator that Russell Wilson had a lot of success with in the past. So again, it's all about prioritizing how much success can you bring Russ back to his old ways in Seattle. I mean, at this point, that's what you got to prioritize. So, like I said, that's what I'm thinking about Nathaniel Hackett being fired. It was well deserved. It didn't work out for a lot of reasons for the Denver Broncos. And I think that the Broncos, they got to hire a coach that's either got ties to Russell Wilson or hire a coach that has ties to an assistant that Russell Wilson used to have success with. So someone like Dan Quinn, someone like possibly Shane Waldron, those are some names that the Denver Broncos have got to think of. So that is why the Denver Broncos firing Nathaniel Hackett was a good move. Although this is not the only problem that the Broncos are currently having with their team right now. They got to make sure to make this hire correct in order to correct the one that they've been getting wrong in recent seasons. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking. Like the video and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @DustinTran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @DustinTran and @Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @DustinTran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video. Comment down below. Check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel, Sports Guy Talking.